They laughed before I even finished my sentence. Not the polite kind. Not the awkward kind. It was loud. Sharp. Public. I remember the sound more than their faces. Chairs scraping. Someone snorting. A woman near the window covering her mouth, failing to hide her smile. Phones lifting, one by one, like instinct. I didn't need to look to know what was happening. I could feel it, that familiar shift in the air when a room decides you don't belong. I stood there holding my bag with both hands, fingers pressed so tightly together they ached. I had chosen this outfit on purpose. Simple. Clean. Nothing flashy. Nothing that tried too hard. Just enough to be invisible. Apparently, invisible wasn't enough. Someone behind me whispered something. I caught the word embarrassing. Another voice followed, louder. Why is she even here? The laughter rolled again, wider this time. Braver. I looked at him then. The one person who knew me. Or at least, who I thought did. He didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He didn't do anything at all. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight, eyes fixed somewhere just past my shoulder, anywhere but me. That hurt more than the laughter. A woman near the front tilted her head and looked me up and down slowly, deliberately, like she was inspecting something defective. "You wore that," she said, not even trying to lower her voice. More laughter. I could feel my face heating up, my chest tightening, the urge to explain rising fast, the dangerous urge to defend myself. To say something. Anything. But I didn't. I stayed exactly where I was. I said nothing. I let them laugh. Because sometimes, the most revealing moment isn't when people are challenged. It's when they think they're winning. And in that room, at that moment, they thought they were. I didn't always live like this. There was a time when everything in my life was loud, the places I went, the people around me, the expectations that followed me everywhere like a shadow. Rooms opened when I walked in. Names were remembered. Smiles came too quickly, too easily. Nothing ever felt earned. People called it privilege. I called it noise. By the time I was old enough to understand what money and influence did to people, I was already tired of being looked at instead of seen. Every conversation felt like a transaction. Every compliment came with a pause, as if they were waiting to see what I could offer in return. So I stepped back. Not dramatically. Not all at once. I didn't announce it or make a point of it. I just simplified. I moved into a small apartment in a part of the city people rarely talked about. I took a job that paid enough to live, not enough to impress. I stopped correcting people when they underestimated me. And something surprising happened. For the first time in my life, the noise faded. No one leaned in when I spoke. No one asked what connections I had. No one tried to impress me with stories they thought I wanted to hear. I became background. Ordinary. And in that ordinariness, I finally felt like myself. That's when I met him. It wasn't romantic at first. Not the way stories usually pretend it is. We met through routine, the kind of routine that belongs to people with normal lives. Same place, same time, different days. A nod turned into a comment. A comment turned into conversation. He was easy to talk to. That was the first thing I noticed. He didn't perform. He didn't ask questions that felt rehearsed. He listened in a way that felt unhurried, like he wasn't waiting for his turn to speak. When I talked about work, he didn't seem bored. When I joked about small, stupid things, he laughed, genuinely, not politely. I liked that. We started seeing each other casually. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became long walks with no destination. He never asked about my past beyond the surface details, and I never volunteered more than I wanted to share. I told him the truth, just not the whole truth. I told him where I lived. I told him what I did for work. I told him what I liked, what I avoided, what I was trying to build. I didn't tell him what people assumed when they heard my real last name. And for a while, it worked. He liked that I didn't care about expensive places. He joked about how low maintenance I was. He said I was refreshing. Grounded. Different from the women he grew up around. I should have noticed the word different. Looking back, there were signs. Small ones. The way he'd tense slightly when we ran into someone he knew unexpectedly. The way he'd laugh a little too loudly when talking about his family's events, as if he needed to convince himself they weren't intimidating. The way he avoided inviting me into that part of his life for months. I told myself it was caution. I told myself it was timing. Then one evening, he sat across from me and took my hand. "My family's having an event," he said. "It's kind of a big deal. I want you there." There was nervousness behind his smile. Not excitement. Nerves. I hesitated. Not because I was afraid of meeting them, but because I knew what families like his often represented. Expectations. Hierarchies. A silent checklist people didn't realize they were holding. "What kind of event?" I asked. He waved it off lightly. "Just a gathering. Some business friends. A few relatives. Nothing crazy." Nothing crazy. I said yes, but not without thinking. That night, alone in my apartment, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. I knew exactly what I was doing when I made my decision. I could have dressed differently. Spoken differently. I could have leaned into the version of myself people respected without questioning. But I didn't want that version to walk into that room. I wanted to know something important. I wanted to see who they were when they thought I had nothing to offer them. I wanted to see who he was when it mattered. So I chose simplicity. Not as a disguise, but as a filter. If they could accept me like that, quiet, unremarkable, unprotected, then maybe what we had was real. And if they couldn't, I pushed the thought away. Because part of me still believed people were better than their worst instincts. And part of me still wanted this to work. By the time I finished getting ready that night, I didn't feel anxious. I felt calm. I had no idea how rare that feeling was about to become. The venue was larger than I expected. Not flashy in an obvious way, but expensive in the quiet, confident manner that didn't need to explain itself. High ceilings. Soft lighting. People who moved through the space like they belonged there, because they believed they did. The moment we stepped inside, I felt it. The shift. Conversations didn't stop, but they bent. Eyes flicked toward us and then away, like they were checking something off an invisible list. I kept my posture relaxed, my expression neutral. I had walked into rooms like this before, years ago. The difference was that this time, no one knew. He squeezed my hand, just once. Not reassurance. Pressure. "I'll introduce you around," he said quickly. I nodded. The first introductions were polite enough. Names exchanged. Smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. A few people asked what I did for work, and when I answered, their interest faded with impressive efficiency. Some nodded. Others excused themselves mid-conversation. I didn't mind. This was expected. What I didn't expect was how quickly politeness turned into something sharper. It started with comments disguised as curiosity. "Oh, that's what you do. That must be fulfilling." Creative work can be unpredictable, though, right? Each sentence ended just softly enough to sound harmless. Each pause after my answers lingered just long enough to make the judgment clear. I watched him as it happened. Watched his smile tighten. Watched his shoulders stiffen. He didn't interrupt. He didn't redirect. He let the conversations move on without defending me, as if staying neutral would somehow keep him safe. Then I met her. She approached us with confidence sharpened by habit. The kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to command attention. Her gaze landed on me and stayed there a second longer than necessary. "So," she said, turning to him. "This is her." There was no greeting. No smile. "Yes," he replied. "This is." She cut him off. "That dress," she said, eyes scanning me slowly. "Is that vintage?" A few people nearby laughed softly. I answered before he could. "No, just something I like." She raised an eyebrow. "Interesting choice. Most women take these events more seriously." The words were calm. The intent wasn't. I felt heat rise up my neck, but I didn't react. I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I simply met her gaze and held it, steady and unflinching. She looked away first. But the damage was done. From that moment on, it was open. People stopped lowering their voices. Comments became bolder. Smiles turned sharp. Someone asked me if I was trying to make a statement. Another suggested, loudly, that I'd misunderstood the invitation. I noticed phones coming out. Casually at first. A quick angle. A short clip. Someone whispered something and a few others laughed. I felt suddenly very aware of my hands. Of where I stood. Of how alone I was in a room full of people. I turned to him. "Can we step outside for a moment?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. Just a second too long. "We should probably stay," he said. "I don't want to make things awkward." Awkward. I nodded slowly. Right. That word echoed in my head as the evening unraveled. The comments became less subtle. "She doesn't really fit the atmosphere, does she? I guess not everyone understands standards. Where did you even find her?" I waited for him to say something. Anything. He didn't. And then someone laughed, openly, loudly, and said the thing no one had dared to say yet. "Honestly, this is embarrassing." The word landed hard. A few people turned to look at me directly now. No pretenses. No masks. Just curiosity and judgment, fully unfiltered. I felt something inside me tighten. Not fear. Not anger. Disappointment. I had come here knowing there was a risk. I had prepared myself for coldness, for distance, even for quiet disapproval. But this casual cruelty, this confidence in their right to humiliate, was something else entirely. And still, I stayed quiet. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain my choices. I didn't correct their assumptions. Because I wasn't watching them anymore. I was watching him. I was watching the way he avoided my eyes. The way he laughed nervously when someone made a joke at my expense. The way he stayed silent, not out of confusion, but out of convenience. That was when I understood something I had been avoiding. This wasn't about class. Or money. Or clothes. This was about character. And character, once revealed, doesn't need to be argued with. The room felt louder now. The laughter sharper. The air heavier. I could feel the moment approaching, the one where something would have to change. I didn't know how yet. But I knew this much. They were done pretending. And so was I. There is a point in humiliation where something strange happens. The noise fades. Not because people stop talking, but because you stop hearing them the same way. Their words lose their sharpness. Their laughter loses its power. What remains is a quiet clarity, almost uncomfortable in its calm. That was where I was standing now. The room hadn't changed. The lighting was still warm. Glasses still clinked. Conversations still overlapped. But something inside me had gone very still. I noticed details I hadn't before. The way people leaned closer to one another, feeding off shared judgment. The way smiles appeared only after someone else laughed first. The way cruelty became easier the moment it was collective. Someone nearby said my name, or at least tried to. They mispronounced it, then laughed as if that were part of the joke. Another phone lifted. I looked at him again. He still hadn't said anything. His silence no longer surprised me. It explained him. And with that realization came an unexpected sense of relief. I exhaled slowly. "Excuse me," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. But it cut through the room anyway. A few heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Not all of them, just enough to create a ripple. I didn't step forward. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't demand attention. I simply spoke. I didn't come here to impress anyone. The laughter near the bar faltered. Someone frowned. I continued, evenly. I didn't come here to compete. Or to prove anything. Or to be evaluated like I'm applying for something. Now more people were listening. Not because they cared, but because the tone had shifted. The moment had changed shape, and they could feel it. I turned slightly, letting my gaze move across the room. I didn't look at any one person for too long. I came here because I was invited, I said. And because I wanted to understand something. A woman near the front crossed her arms. Someone else scoffed quietly. I didn't stop. I wanted to see who people become when they think they're above someone else. That was it. No accusation. No anger. No defense. Just truth, spoken plainly. For a second, no one reacted. Then someone laughed, a single, uncertain sound, and it died almost immediately. The people around them didn't join in. A few looked away. One man cleared his throat and checked his phone, suddenly very interested in the screen. The silence spread. It wasn't dramatic. There was no collective gasp. No sudden realization. It was slower than that. Uncomfortable. People shifted their weight. A woman who had been smiling moments earlier pressed her lips together. Another glanced toward the exit, as if considering whether leaving now would draw too much attention. I could feel the change like pressure in the air. I hadn't challenged them directly. I hadn't insulted anyone. I had simply held up a mirror. And mirrors make people uneasy. I looked at him one last time. He finally met my eyes. There was something there now, not concern, not guilt, but calculation. A quick assessment of risk. Of damage. Of what this moment might cost him. That was when I knew. Not because of what he felt. But because of what he didn't. I nodded once, more to myself than to him. I think I've seen enough, I said quietly. Someone tried to laugh again. It sounded forced this time, brittle at the edges. Wow, a voice said. That's dramatic. I smiled, just slightly. No, I replied. It's honest. I reached for my bag. My hands were steady. As I turned, I felt eyes on me, not mocking now, not amused, but uncertain. Curious. The kind of attention people give when they're no longer sure they're on the right side of something. Behind me, someone whispered, "Who does she think she is?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because the question was already spreading through the room, quietly, urgently, without my help. And for the first time that evening, they weren't laughing. They were wondering. The silence didn't break all at once. It fractured. A murmur started near the back of the room, not loud enough to draw attention, but distinct enough to feel different from the laughter earlier. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't amused. It was confused. I heard my name again. This time, pronounced correctly. I paused near the edge of the room, not because I wanted to stay, but because I sensed something shifting behind me. Not emotionally, socially. The kind of shift that happens when people realize they may have miscalculated. A man near the center leaned toward the woman beside him and whispered something urgently. She stiffened, then glanced in my direction, her expression tightening. Another voice followed. Then another. Low. Quick. Controlled. The questions started moving faster than the answers. Wait, is that? No, it can't be. I'm telling you, I've seen her before. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Because recognition doesn't announce itself. It spreads. Someone stepped forward, an older man, well-dressed but understated, the kind of presence people instinctively make space for without quite knowing why. He looked at me, then at the group around him. "Excuse me," he said, quietly but firmly. "You may want to reconsider how you're speaking." The room stilled again, this time more deliberately. Clarification followed in fragments. "She's not. That project last year." "No, not publicly, but her name was on the brief." I saw faces change. Subtly. Smiles fading. Backs straightening. People recalculating their posture, their tone, their distance from one another. Not because I demanded it. Because context had arrived. He finally spoke. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked under his breath, stepping closer. I looked at him for a long moment. "Because I didn't think I had to," I said. My voice didn't shake. It surprised me how calm I felt. That was when another figure entered the room, not dramatically, not announced. Just a presence that caused conversations to pause mid-word. A man with silver at his temples and an expression that suggested he'd already seen enough. He didn't look at the crowd first. He looked at me. "Are you ready?" he asked. There was no title. No explanation. No display. Just familiarity. A woman near the bar inhaled sharply. Someone else whispered his name, then stopped, as if afraid to say it too loudly. People knew him. Not as a celebrity. Not as a headline. As someone whose approval carried weight. I nodded once. Almost. He turned then, finally addressing the room. "I won't take much of your time," he said. "But I do want to be clear about something." Every word landed. My presence here tonight was not social. It was professional. A ripple moved through the crowd. "I've been observing," he continued. "And I've learned what I needed to learn." No accusations. No raised voice. No spectacle. Just consequence. "If this is how people are treated when they're perceived as having no leverage," he said calmly, "then this is not a space I'm interested in being associated with." Someone opened their mouth to speak. He didn't look at them. "I believe respect should be the default," he added. "Not a reaction." That was all. He turned back to me, offering his arm. I took it. Behind us, the room didn't erupt. It didn't collapse. It simply stalled. People stood frozen in their roles, unsure which expressions to wear now that the script had changed. I felt it then, not triumph, not satisfaction, but something quieter. Relief. As we moved toward the exit, I heard the questions grow bolder. "Do you know who she is?" "I thought she was just." "We might have made a mistake." No one laughed. Not anymore. I didn't look back. Because the reveal wasn't about who I was. It was about who they had chosen to be, before they thought it mattered. And that, once seen, couldn't be unseen. The doors closed behind us with a soft, final sound. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just enough to mark the end of something. Outside, the night air felt cooler than I expected. Cleaner. Like stepping out of a room that had been slowly suffocating without realizing it. I took a breath and let it settle in my lungs. Neither of us spoke at first. The car was already waiting. He opened the door for me, the same way he always had, calm, unhurried, respectful. I got in and watched the building through the window as we pulled away. From the outside, it looked unchanged. Lights glowing. Music still playing. People still inside, moving through the same space they had before. But I knew better. Something had shifted in there. Not because of who I was. But because of what they had revealed about themselves. I rested my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. For the first time that evening, my body caught up with what had happened. The tension drained slowly, leaving behind a familiar ache, not physical, but emotional. The kind that comes after disappointment finally stops fighting reality. "You handled that well," he said quietly after a moment. I didn't answer right away. "Well," I replied eventually, "I handled it honestly." That felt more accurate. My phone buzzed in my bag. I didn't need to check it to know what it was. Messages. Missed calls. People who hadn't noticed me before suddenly realizing they might want to. I left it there. Silence, I was learning, was more powerful than any response. When we reached my place, he walked me to the door. He hesitated, just slightly, the way people do when they're unsure whether they're still welcome in a space they assumed belonged to them. "I should explain," he said. I turned to face him. "Go ahead." He took a breath. I didn't know how to stop it without making things worse. I studied his face, really studied it this time. Not the version I'd filled in with hope, but the one standing in front of me now. "You didn't stop it," I said gently. "That's the explanation." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I continued, not unkindly. "I didn't need you to fight anyone. I didn't need you to defend my choices or impress your family. I just needed you not to disappear." The words hung between us, heavy but clear. "I see now," he said quietly. I nodded. "I know." That was the difference. Understanding after the moment had passed didn't change what had already been revealed. I think it's better if we don't see each other anymore, I said. He flinched, just slightly. Is there anything I can do? He asked. I thought about it for a second, then shook my head. No, I said. That's kind of the point. I unlocked my door and paused before stepping inside. I hope you learn from this, I added. Not for me. For the next person. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. I went inside and closed the door gently behind me. That night, I slept deeply. No replaying conversations. No imagining alternate outcomes. No wondering what I should have said differently. The clarity was complete. In the days that followed, the story spread, not loudly, not sensationally, but steadily. People talked. Connections shifted. Invitations quietly disappeared and reappeared in different places. I didn't comment. I didn't explain. I didn't correct the rumors. I didn't need to. What mattered had already happened in that room, long before anyone recognized me. I went back to my routine. The same cafe. The same work. The same quiet apartment. Nothing about my life needed to change just because other people had finally noticed. Except one thing. I was more careful now. Not about what I wore. Not about where I went. But about who I allowed close enough to see me. Weeks later, I found myself volunteering at an event I'd been meaning to attend for a while. Nothing glamorous. Just people helping because they wanted to. No one asked who I was. No one cared. I liked that. I met someone there. Not romantically, not yet, maybe not ever. Just someone kind. Someone attentive. Someone who listened without calculating what it might cost or gain them. And that felt promising. Sometimes people ask me if I regret staying silent that night. If I wish I'd spoken up sooner. If things might have gone differently. I always give the same answer. No. Because silence didn't make me smaller. It revealed everyone else. They laughed first. And I let them. Because when people think they're winning, they show you exactly who they are. And once you see that, you're free to walk away.